One after another, Russian military propagandists are beginning to openly talk about the failure of the Russian offensive on Sumy. The battles for the village of Kondratovka turned into a disaster for Russian troops. Russian army units found themselves half-encircled, attempts to unblock positions failed, and statements about success are more reminiscent of self-deception. Z-blogger Anatoly Radov, one of the most active supporters of the war, tried to give the situation the appearance of control in his message. He admitted that everything is bad. At the same time, he began to claim that the situation would soon be corrected. They sent the guys. Now, theoretically, they should sort it out. The Ukrainian Armed Forces threw a lot of effort into the breakthrough. The Marines and the 30th Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces withstood the onslaught. As it turned out later, this post was nothing more than an attempt to save face. More frank assessments are given by other propaganda channels. Thus, the Z Resource, Northern Channel, associated with the RF Armed Forces, actually announced the imminent defeat of the Russian group near Kondratovka. According to its data, the occupiers in this area were actually left without support. Sumy borderland, still a meat grinder. Near Kondratovka, complete hell. The 9th MRR, which was supposed to pull the guys of the 30th MRR out of Kondratovka, did not come. The reasons were not announced. The results are clear. Kondratovka is half-encircled. Z-Channel wrote. According to the same source, the situation is also critical in the neighboring areas. Street fighting is underway in Alexeyevka. Ukrainian forces are forcing close contact. And in Yunakovka, the Russian army is suffering another blow. Another example of what happens when victory is painted on paper. Another illusion of control instead of an honest picture. And the boys are now paying for someone's beautiful reports, notes Severny Kanal. In general, even military bloggers who are inclined to victorious rhetoric admit that Ukrainian forces are not only holding the line in Sumy Oblast, but are also launching pinpoint counterattacks, dislodging the occupiers from previously occupied positions. Russian troops, despite loud statements and sending additional units, are unable to turn the situation in their favor.
Russian forces attacked Ukraine with 4 S-300-400 missiles and 136 Shahid and decoy drones overnight into Monday, the Ukrainian Air Force reported. According to Associated Press, they said 61 drones were intercepted and 47 more were either jammed or lost from radars mid-flight. Authorities in Sumy said that Russian drone strike damaged civilian infrastructure facilities. A non-residential building was partially destroyed and then set on fire. A Russian drone attack in Mykolaiv also damaged an industry warehouse. Ukraine State Emergency Service reported that fire spread over an area of 3,500 square meters. No casualties have been reported.
Over the last 34 years, Russia has been involved in various armed conflicts, but none have seen catastrophic losses like the war against Ukraine. The wars in Transnistria, 2 Chechen campaigns, and the war against Georgia pale in comparison to the losses in the war against Ukraine. Dmytro Snihirov, Ukrainian military expert, said this to Espresso media outlet. According to him, Russia is employing tactics reminiscent of World War II, known as Zhukovism. The Russians themselves refer to it as "we won't hold back on price, women will give birth to more." The total mobilization reserve of the occupying country is about 20 million, so the idea that a Russian command values the lives of its soldiers is completely contradictory to the nature of the fighting tactics, which are characterized by meat assaults or banzai attacks. A striking example of such banzai attacks is the attempted advance of the invaders in the Kondratovka area of Ukraine's Sumy region. Where certain tactical successes were achieved, they came at the cost of significant losses in personnel. Of the 100 stormtroopers who participated in the assault on the position of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, only 8 survived. According to Russian sources, these survivors were again thrown into the line of battle for further casualties. Over the 3 years of war against Ukraine, Russia has lost thousands of elite soldiers. The Special Forces brigades of the main directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, the airborne divisions, Special Operations Forces, pilots and marine brigades make up the core of the Russian army. Their training took years and millions of dollars. The expert added, the losses of the invaders in the Pokrovsk direction alone can be compared to the losses of the Russian army in the Second Chechen War. According to the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, over 15,000 invaders were destroyed in January in Pokrovsk direction, of which 7,000 were irrecoverable. For the entire period of the Second Chechen War, the Russian army's losses amounted to over 6,000. The expert added. According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, since August the 6th, 2024, the Russian army in the Kursk region has lost over 62,000 soldiers killed and wounded. Cannon fodder is abundant among the invaders. Combat units are practically non-existent. The latest vivid example is the deployment of an FSB regiment to the Kramatorsk front. This was a significant blow to the combat effectiveness of the Russian armed forces. Dmytro Snihirov says that to replenish the elite of the army, the Kremlin has been forced to turn to hundreds of thousands of civilians and convicts, whom they promised to free in exchange for participating in the war. Despite Putin's statements that Russia does not need foreign mercenaries, the Kremlin is actively recruiting soldiers from North Korea and mercenaries from other countries. At this point, several dozen cases of deaths of citizens from African countries, particularly Somalia and Sudan, have been confirmed. There are reports of the deaths of citizens from Nepal. To compensate for the colossal losses in personnel, the composition of the Russian occupying army is being replenished by conducting raids on the residents of Central Asian states, labor migrants within the territory of the aggressor country. Currently, Russia continues to recruit additional forces to support wave attack, trying to weaken the Ukrainian defense. However, the need for constant replenishment of personnel on the front lines is almost certain to continue limiting Russia's ability to form units with higher combat readiness.